Get started. All right, good morning, good afternoon. If you're in the central time zone, if you're, or good morning if you're on the West Coast. So I am excited. Today is Thursday, March 4th, and we are celebrating Women's History Month all month, and we are going to be talking about your favorite topic. I'm convinced you guys are excited about the topic of negotiation. Am I right? Am I right? Yes, you guys love to negotiate, and so we're going to talk about it all month. Or do you? Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a, maybe this is a I don't know, warning or whatever, but if you hear a cat meowing, my cat will not leave me alone. She evidently wants to be part of this episode today. So if you hear her, she's grumbling about something. Anyway, so please ignore her. But we're going to talk about negotiation. And I don't know of a lot of people who like negotiating. I don't know a lot of people who find joy and energy in negotiating. And so I want to talk about it because it's a really important skill that we all should have. And quite honestly, it really just takes a mindset shift and you can become a great negotiator and you can enjoy it. Honestly, promise me, you really can. And we'll talk about a mindset shift in another episode. Today, we're going to talk about courage and stepping out and asking, because if you don't ask, you won't get. All right, it's kind of as simple as that. But I want to start today, March 4th episode, with a quote from my absolute favorite calendar. And this quote is from Wilma Rudolph. So Wilma Rudolph was an amazing athlete, and she broke records and really was a trailblazer for women and for Black women specifically. So I'm really excited that we have this quote from her today. And it says, "Never underestimate the power of dreams and the influence of the human spirit. We are all the same in this notion. The potential for greatness lives within each of us." Yeah? So let's just rest there for a second. We are all the same in this notion. The potential for greatness lives within each of us. In order to make the impact and bring the greatness out that's within, we need to have courage. So to have this quote on March 4th, this very day that I'm giving an episode or a message on courage, is mind-blowing. Is it not? Is it not mind-blowing? Okay, so we're going to make some hand pies. I've got everything together in an assembly fashion. I've been making hand pies since about 10 o'clock, trying to prepare for today. And then we're going to be talking about Esther. Esther is one of my favorite women in history, and she has an incredible story about courage. There's a lot of lessons in the book of Esther, but she is fantastic, and there are words that her uncle Mordecai told her that we all need to remember, especially when we're uncomfortable with negotiating. So that's where that all comes from. So here, very simple recipe. We're going to go through this real quick, and then I'll get into Esther. But to make the hand pies, it's very, very simple. And this recipe, I don't remember if I told you this or not. So if I did, it's worth repeating. The recipe comes from Cardia Brown. So Miss Delicious Brown is what she goes by on Food Network because everything is delicious that she makes. So I am really excited to share this recipe with you. And so we have these blackberries that we picked from our backyard and froze them. And I thawed them out. And then you mix them with some sugar and a cornstarch and lemon mixture. Just a real quick tip on lemons. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but you can get an incredible amount of lemon juice or lime juice out of lemons or limes if you warm them up first. So just put them in the microwave for 5-10 seconds, not very long at all, just really quick, and warm them up, and then roll them on your counter, like roll them on your counter, and it will release a lot of the juice that's in the pulp. It is amazing how much more juice you can get out of a lemon by doing that. Anyway, just a quick tip. So anyway, so then you heat all this up and you get I'm just going to get closer here, a substance kind of like this. So it's the filling that's going to go into our hand pies. Another tip is, this morning I did not let the filling cool, and so the pie crust, I'm just using standard, this is standard Meyer pie crust, and so the pie crust melted a bit. So you can make homemade pie crust if you want. You don't have to. This recipe just says, hey, do store-bought, and why wouldn't we do that? Because it's available and it's very good as well. So tip is, let the filling cool. So all we're going to do is we are going to place about a big serving spoon size in the center of the disc. So what I did was I rolled out the pie crust, and then I used this bowl, put it on the pie crust, and then I cut out circles. And I got as many as I could out of each pie crust. That's all you got to do. It's very, very simple. The recipe calls for putting a square of cream cheese in each one. And the last time I did that, I didn't like it. The cream cheese didn't melt. I just didn't like it. So you can do that if you want. Here's my cat. This is Roxy. So then you take a fork and press down on the edges of the pie to seal it. Okay, so very simple. Press down and to seal it. So some of these have more filling in them than others, but that's what makes it fun, I guess, or homemade. So I'm going to continue to do that. I got one more left here. We'll just fold them over and crimp them with the fork. The only other thing we got to do here, my oven is preheated already to 375. I made a simple egg wash. So this is a whole egg with 1 tablespoon of water, and then you just whisk it. And so I've got my egg wash. I'm going to wash it, brush it, I guess, all over. That's going to make it turn a nice brown crust. And I'm going to brush it over all of the top, all over everything. And then I'm going to take a knife, little paring knife, and cut some slits in the top of the pie. Those are vents. So that's going to help as the fruit warms up. The pie doesn't explode because the heat will have a place to escape. Okay? And from there, I'm going to put them on my parchment paper. I love parchment paper. That is the best invention. Well, one of the best inventions ever. Okay, so there we go. So I have them. So here's what they look like. You can see them. Here's what they look like. And then I'm going to put them into the oven for 20 minutes. And so while they are cooking, we're going to talk about courage, and we're going to talk about Esther. Okay, so let's talk about Esther. Esther is the queen of Persia. Now, researchers say she was around 13 or 14 years old, which is crazy. We don't really know exactly how old she was, but she was somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14 years old. Could have been 15, could have been 13, but regardless, if you're 15 or 13 or 14 and you're the queen of Persia, that is wild and really crazy. So here's how Esther became queen of Persia in a very quick synopsis. Esther was raised, I would imagine they were simple, in a simple way, simple times. She's Jewish, and she was raised by her uncle Mordecai. And so when she was 13 or 14, Mordecai sent her to become part of the king's harem. And he told her, don't tell anyone that you're Jewish. I'm kind of reading between the lines here, but my guess is because of discrimination, because she may not have been treated the same. That there was a big race or problem between the classes and also between races. So he asked her, or told her, do not tell anyone that you're Jewish, and she did not. So she became part of the harem, and Queen Vashti, so King Xerxes' wife, Queen Vashti, had a bit of an indiscretion, and so the king found out about it, and, off with you, Queen Vashti, whatever. I don't know if she died or what happened to her, but she's gone. So he needs a new king or queen, a new queen. And so he brings his harem into the court, and he, was figuring out who is going to be my new queen. Well, he finds favor with Esther, and he says, Esther, and again, I am totally summarizing. I was not there, so I'm kind of embellishing. But Esther, I find favor with you, and you are my queen. And so Esther becomes the queen of Persia at 14 years old. Wow, crazy. Okay, so Mordecai was he was trusted by the king. The king trusted Mordecai, her uncle. And so Mordecai would hang out at the palace gates. That's kind of where his place was. And he overheard a couple soldiers. Mordecai tells Queen Esther tells King Xerxes does an investigation and finds out that it was to death. Okay, king says, again, I'm embellishing. King says, there's a problem here, because obviously I need a bodyguard, because people are trying to kill me. I need somebody who's my right hand who can help protect me. So he promotes this man named Haman. And so he promotes Haman to the second, like the king's right hand. So Haman is one step below the king, and he had, in my opinion, a very huge ego. And here's why I say that. Because Haman becomes this royal man, and he says, kingdom, you must bow to me. Right? That's what Haman says. Haman's not the king, but he says, kingdom, you must bow to me. Everybody in the land must bow to me. So he goes to Mordecai, knowing that Mordecai's not gonna bow to him. He didn't like Mordecai. So he goes to Mordecai at the palace gates, and he says, Mordecai, bow to me. Bow to me. And Mordecai says, no, I'm not going to bow to you. That is not what I'm going to do. I am totally not going to do that. So Haman got really irritated, and he goes to the king and he says, okay, king, there are people in your kingdom that are not abiding by the traditions and cultures that you've set forth. I think you should decree that if you don't abide by these cultures and traditions, then you should be put to death. And the king said, well, absolutely. Of course, that makes so much sense, because everybody should be abiding to my traditions and the cultures of the land and my rules and laws. So he signs the decree, and so it was. Anybody who did not abide by those traditions would be put to death. Well, one of those traditions was bowing to Haman, and Haman knew that. So Mordecai's not going to bow to Haman, and neither are any of the Jews. They're going to be put to death. So Mordecai went immediately to Esther and said, Esther, you have to do something about this. You have to go to the king. You have to tell him. Well, that was a really big dilemma for her. And here's why. When you go to the king unsummoned or not invited, you run the risk of being killed, being put to death. Because when you go into the courtroom and the king, imagine, the king's got the throne, right? And there's people everywhere, and you walk in uninvited. If the king does not hold out his scepter and welcome you to his throne to talk to you, you are put to death. Esther had a big dilemma. She's like, Uncle Mordecai, I can't do that. I can't do that. And here's what he said to her. I'm going to read it. So he said, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. You and your father's family will perish. And who knows? This is the part I want you guys to pay attention to. And who knows? But you have come to royal position for such a time as this. So who knows that you, I'm talking to you, have come to this place in your life for a time such as this? Who knows that a negotiation or a situation, or you need to speak up about something, and you are the person who needs to do that, and you are in this place because of this time is your time, and you can choose to be silent, or you can choose to have courage like Esther did and do whatever it is that you need to do. So here's the end of Esther's story, because I want to be sure that I complete the story. And that is this. She said, Mordecai, I will fast for 3 days. And at the end of 3 days, I will go to the king. And so she did. And now imagine, she's 14 years old. She's the queen of Persia. She's a new queen in Persia. And I can only imagine that it didn't probably sit very well with a lot of other people in the court, that this new woman comes into the harem from, simple life, from she was a commoner who comes into the court, and now she's queen. And I can only imagine that must have been really, really tough. And so now she has made the decision that she needs to tell the king what's going on. Because if she doesn't, she will die. If she goes to the king and he doesn't summon her, he doesn't find favor with her and bring her to his throne, she dies. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't, either way. The worst thing that can happen, she dies. The best thing that can happen is he finds favor with her and he listens to her, and she saves her people. I mean, this is huge. So can you imagine? She walks into this huge courtroom, just in this palace, this huge courtroom, and there is the throne on the side, right at it, or maybe right at the entrance, or at the long hallway. There's the throne, and King Xerxes is there with his big scepter, and there are people everywhere. I just imagine there's people everywhere. There's courtiers over here and over there, and they're all whispering. And she walks in her beauty, in her robes, and knowing she is not invited. You must be invited, and she was not. And everybody knows she's not on the guest list. So can you imagine all the murmuring that was going on, right? All that murmuring. And so she walks in, and she looks at her husband, the king, and is praying to God that he holds out his scepter and he finds favor with her, and he does. So she goes up to him and she says, King, I want to throw a banquet for you and your court, which meant Haman, okay? So she had a great strategy to try and have the king uncover Haman's evil plan to destroy the Jewish people, which included her and Mordecai. So they had a banquet, and the Haman's plot was uncovered. And the king then hanged Haman, so he was killed, and Mordecai was honored. And the king was able to write an amendment or something anyway to the decree to fix it all, because Esther had courage. So here we are, and we're talking about negotiation, and we're here at a time like this. We're here for our potential for greatness, as Wilma Rudolph says. Potential. We all have this potential for greatness. And so we need to have the courage to ask. We need to have the courage in all negotiations to talk about it, not to ignore it, not to accept it. I want to just ask you a question. What do you think is negotiable? What is negotiable? If your boss comes to you and says, congratulations, it's raise time, and and here's your raise. It's X%, or it's, we're going to change some offices, and so I want to move your office to down the hall, or whatever. And that might not really be applicable in today's world, because most of us are working from home. But I think you understand. If your boss comes to you and tells you something that is going to happen, is that negotiable? If he or she says, I'm going to move you to an office down the hall, and you really don't want to be in that office. It's right across the hall from the bathroom or from the coffee room, and there's chatter, and I can't concentrate, and blah, blah, blah. Do you have to just go, oh, okay, when do I have to move? Or can you talk about it? Is it negotiable? So the answer is yes, it's negotiable. Everything is negotiable. That's what I want to introduce you to today. Everything is negotiable. If you don't ask, you won't get, right? No matter how awkward, no matter how comfortable or uncomfortable, we have to remember Esther and have the courage to ask. We have to have the courage, because if you don't ask, you don't get. What's the worst thing that can happen? You ask and they say no, no harm, no foul. You're still where you were. But if you ask and you get, you're further ahead, right? So courage, remember the words of Mordecai, and you might be in this time such as this, because to make your impact, to realize the greatness, as Wilma Rudolph says, that's inside of you. And so that comes into negotiation as well. I believe, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the month, but I know, it's not even I believe, I know through research, personal experience, and interviews that the wage gap between men and women is partly there, not 100%, but partly there because women aren't comfortable asking for themselves. We are much better at negotiating for other people than we are negotiating for ourselves. We don't ask. And if you don't ask, you don't get. And I'm talking in general terms. Not every woman is this way. Some women will ask. Some women get it, or they're comfortable with it. I shouldn't say that. I'm saying they're comfortable with it. But most women are not. And I was that way at some point in my career until I got the courage to ask. And then every time I would ask and I would negotiate and I'd win, even if I didn't, negotiation is about a win-win. We want the other person to win, and we want to win. That's how we negotiate. It's not win-lose. Some people negotiate with a masculine style that is win-lose. Other people negotiate with a feminine style, which is win-win. And that's how I negotiate. It's so much more fun when it's a win-win, and that's a mindset shift that we'll talk about in another episode. So here, as we wrap up, because I know I'm running out of time, but as we wrap up, I want you to remember Esther, and I want you to remember Mordecai's words. His words are, and who knows, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this, and it's your obligation to ask. It's your obligation to negotiate on behalf of yourself and of the future women who come behind you, to be that trailblazer and to have the courage to ask and to negotiation. Who knows but that you have come to this position, this royal position, for such a time as this. And that's my message for today. I do have about 5 minutes left on the oven, but for miracle of television, we do have some completed hand pies. These are blackberry hand pies. And again, that recipe is on Food Network. Just search blackberry hand pies from delicious Miss Brown and you will get it. Thanks for joining me. And next week, we will talk some more about negotiation. Take care.